Hello, and welcome to our respected panelists and participants. My name is Ole Thoresen. I'm the IAED Vice Coordinator for Europe and the Middle East. It is a pleasure to welcome you to this webinar on the theme, the potential of private sector initiatives to boost the North Korean economy. Throughout this year, UPF Europe and Middle East has been holding a series of international leadership conferences on the theme toward peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. So this webinar is part of 3 ILCs being held in June, July, and August 2021. This July conference focuses on track 2 diplomacy and the role of non-state actors toward peace on the peninsula. As you may know, UPF is an NGO with general consultative status at the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations. UPF's main goal is to promote the development of the world toward permanent peace and cooperation, based on the vision that humankind is one global family. And to achieve this goal, UPS has created several associations that work in various fields. The present webinar is organized by the International Association for Peace and Economic Development, IAED, which, as its name indicates, aims to contribute to universal peace through harmonious economic development. Before we begin, I would like to refer to some technical details. We have translation into Russian. The chat icon is for remarks and information, and the bios of the panelists will be also available there on the chat. For questions, please use the Q&A icon. Then your questions will be answered by our staff, and questions to the panelists will be dealt with during our Q&A session. Now, let me introduce the moderator of this webinar. In Dr. Claude Béglé, we have a very experienced and knowledgeable man. Dr. Béglé is a Swiss entrepreneur, founder and president of the investment company Symbioswiss. He is a former member of the Swiss Parliament and has a PhD in economics, a master's in law, and also in international relations. He has held leading positions in prestigious organizations and companies in numerous countries and has been involved with a wide spectrum of business sectors. Now, it is my pleasure to hand over to Dr. Béglé, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So this fascinating conversation which we are going to have today will be with 3 brilliant speakers. There will be Mr. Paul Chia. There will be Mr. Marc Tocola and Mr. Pablo Sanz. We will try to debate about how the North Korea economy can open. What are the preconditions? What are the ways, possibly the hindrance factor, and what can facilitate not an instant transition, because this is mission impossible, but something which is relatively smooth. And obviously, if from an economic point of view, we manage to have a peaceful transition, that will have a direct impact on the geopolitical and military side of it. So to start with, Mr. Paul Chia has been a very active Dutch investor in the IT sector for more than 25 years. Besides a study in information technology, he studied cultural anthropology in Amsterdam. And I think to work on IT and on anthropology, you really have the world in your arms because you have the two sides of it. He graduated on research on the Indian software industry. And as you can imagine, I'm accompanying you today. As you can see, I'm in Mumbai, just in the middle of the monsoon in India. In 1995, Paul founded GPI Consultancy, a consultancy firm in the field of international outsourcing. Paul has contacts with companies in many parts of the world. His business contacts with North Korea started in 1997, and his first visit took place in 2006. He has a very deep understanding. He has a very much inside knowledge of what happens in North Korea, and it will be quite interesting to hear from him. He now organizes business missions to this country on a regular basis, including, I think, media business mission. And he organized those tours. The last visit was in 2019. So please, Mr. Tia, the word is yours, and we would like to try to learn from you what is on the hidden face of the moon, what is on what so many people do not know, what is the reality of North Korea. Please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you for your introduction, Dr. Béglé. I'm based in the Netherlands, and it seems that we are also in the monsoon season because it is raining all the time in this summer. First of all, I will show you some pictures I have made during my last visit to North Korea, which was in 2019. What you will see here is a picture from the Pyongyang International Trade Fair, which takes place every year. Actually, it takes place every spring and every autumn in Pyongyang, and it is the largest trade fair in the city. And what we see here is a large number of booths from both international companies and North Korean companies. And this trade fair is expanding every year. It started in just one hall, and last time it was already spread out to 2 big halls, and also a lot of booths on the outside of the halls. It gives you an indication on the development of international trade. I must say most of the foreign companies, they are from China, but there are also some companies from other Asian countries and even from Europe. It is heavily crowded, and you can also buy some articles. I just want to show it as an indication of existing international trade with North Korea. The country wants foreign investments. It is interested in foreign trade, and actually over the last years, international business with North Korea is growing. Unfortunately for the country, there are the United Nations Security Council sanctions, officially to hamper the growth and the use of nuclear technology and nuclear weapons. And these sanctions also have a negative effect on, let's say, legitimate business. For example, it is not possible to produce garments anymore in North Korea. And I always brought a number of European garment producers to the country, which is not allowed anymore. But nevertheless, despite the sanctions, foreign trade has been growing. And unfortunately, because of the COVID-19 situation, North Korea closed its borders since early 2020. That means that international trade in physical goods is almost impossible at the moment. However, despite the closure of the borders, it is still possible to conduct online IT-related work on behalf of foreign clients and to be done in North Korea. This is a type of business which is not very well known, and that's why I selected this topic for my presentation. And examples of this online work can be found in administrative work, software development, production of computer games, and animation. I will give some examples later. And there are some advantages of online work, both for North Korea and also for the foreign client. For North Korea, it means that it creates new and also highly skilled jobs. Office work, so it is quite pleasurable to do this type of work. And it can also be started quickly. You do not need large investments to start online work. For North Korea, it also gives the option for knowledge transfer. They can learn about the business processes and the way of working we are used to in the Western countries, which is quite interesting for them, of course. And it gives them the option for deep personal contacts with foreign clients, maybe online and hopefully in the future also with personal visits to each other's country. And for the foreign client, it gives access to talent, IT talent, which is really scarce. Actually, there's a shortage of IT skills in Europe. Doing IT-related work is quite expensive in Europe, and working with North Koreans, it gives you the option for cost reduction, and it might give you access to new export markets. It could be North Korea, but it could also be other Asian countries. For example, if you want to translate your software into Japanese or in Korean or in Chinese, you can do this in North Korea, and it can give you options to sell your products in other Asian countries as well. And of course, the basic for this type of outsourcing is the fact that there is a high level of ICT education in North Korea. The government has been investing a lot of money in education. They have always done this, and also in ICT. This is one of the ICT internet rooms in Kim Il-sung University in Pyongyang. What we also have in North Korea is a number of large companies and of course smaller companies, meaning that the ICT infrastructure, let's say the combination of trained staff, available office space, and all the IT infrastructure is available. This is an example of a large IT company. They do have their own campus in Pyongyang, different buildings with offices. They even have their own hotel because of a number of international guests and clients. And what you see is offices with, in this case, a lot of computers. It's like an Indian software company, I would say, not much different. Apart from the large companies, the one I just showed you has more than 1,000 employees, but there are also smaller companies, of course. This is a smaller one, maybe 1 or 2 dozen of IT staff, working for foreign clients, by the way. And what can be done in North Korea? Different types of work. It started with simple administrative work, like data entry. This is a girl, she has been typing data from a telephone directory into the computer to be used by a European client. It's very simple work, and more popular is making software. North Korea has already a lot of skills. They do develop their own software products. For example, in the field of face recognition, fingerprint software, antivirus software, sometimes based on artificial intelligence, high-end software. And the European client can just search for a suitable North Korean partner to do the work which is required. For example, the production of websites. These are some examples of North Korean websites. You can think about mobile apps. This is an example of a North Korean telephone, a mobile phone with North Korean apps, but they are quite capable of making apps for European clients as well. Apart from, let's say, administrative software, you can also think about technical software, which is inside the smartphone, for example. In the past, South Korean software producer Samsung, they collaborated with a North Korean software company to make what's called embedded software, technical software inside the heart of the telephone, as an example of a potential form of collaboration. On the right side, you can see some medical equipment made in North Korea, and also the software, the technical software, has been made by a North Korean software company. Producing computer games is an option. This picture shows some games made in North Korea in the field of Go, the Asian chess. And it is quite difficult. It is more difficult to make computer versions of Go than computer version of the European chess. But this North Korean company made such a high level, high quality game of Go that they even won some international gaming contests in the field of Go. North Korea is already well known and quite successful in the field of animation. For example, in the field of animations for children, there is this company, I think they also employ around 1,000 employees only making animation. A lot of animation is made for Chinese companies, but also South Korean companies have been using the services of this North Korean company. And even in the past, Walt Disney did outsource some of its cartoon work to North Korea. Another example of, let's say, gaming is this origami software. Origami, the Asian art of paper folding, which is not easy to do it by hand, and it's extremely difficult to make computer versions, let's say simulation software of origami. And this is a North Korean startup company. They have invented a new form of simulation software, and actually this is a startup. They are looking for foreign investors to build this example into let's say, a real-life extensive version of the software. And they need not only investors, but also European partners to do the marketing of the software and to find partners, because it can be used in several fields. For example, in training for mathematics for children and in other fields. This is an example of where private companies can nicely work together between Europe and North Korea. And what is also important, I would say, because we are dealing with countries in different political systems, and unfortunately with the kind of Cold War situation, I would say the more human interaction, the better it is. And trade and business gives you the option for human interaction. That is not always the case. If you want to produce garments in North Korea, for example, there is not a lot of human interaction. Or if you are selling televisions, like Philips has been doing, there is not a lot of interaction possible. However, if you are doing IT-related work, like software development, it is rather complicated and you need a lot of communication to do this successfully. And that means that often it is better to have personal interaction, to have personal meetings. For example, going to Pyongyang to meet the counterpart in often an informal setting. This improves the quality of communication and it also creates trust. And trust is something which is missing between North Korea and the outside world. So business can be helpful in creating this trust. And another example is, it is possible to visit the North Koreans, but it is also possible and appreciated if you invite the North Koreans for a visit to you in Europe. It could be in the field of technology, business, or in the field of academics, and also in the field of peace. For example, this is a delegation of the North Korean KNPC, the Korean National Peace Committee, and they were invited by several Dutch organizations to visit the Netherlands. And they did meet several Dutch peace-related organizations. They also met some representatives of companies. They were able to visit other European countries as well. And those are some examples of useful visits which create also trust, and it will deepen the communication. And I think this is very important, and private businesses can play a very positive role in this field. So thank you for giving me the time for this short presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. I'd like to have a quick question to you. I was also in North Korea. I agree with you that quite a number of North Koreans have a high level of education. I agree as well that the IT would be a low entrance barrier sector, that the labor cost in North Korea make it competitive even versus China or Vietnam. So all of that makes sense to enter in software development, in game, in animation. However, North Korea is also quite well known for cyber attacks. So how to ensure that asking North Koreans to develop software will never have a Trojan horse with the risk of cyber fragility, which could be exploited later on? I don't know. I don't want to be nasty, but it's an automatic question which comes when we talk about this sector. What are your views?
Cybersecurity is very important. And actually, even in Holland, when I'm reading the press, we can see examples of cybercrime appearing every day. And every week we can see very large intrusions by criminals into foreign IT infrastructures. So it is very important. And it's also an important issue if you decide on outsourcing some of your work to a foreign partner. But to be honest, this is a question, it always comes up if you want to do outsourcing. And it is also a question which came up if I was involved in arranging outsourcing to India. If you want to arrange outsourcing to Russia or to Eastern Europe or to China, every client will be worried about the security issues if you are working with a foreign supplier. And so it has nothing to do with North Korea. It has to do always with the topic of outsourcing. You cannot avoid this topic. And that means you have to do your research, and you have to do, you have to do your research if it is North Korea, if it is Russia, China, or India. But to be honest, a North Korean IT company, it is trying to find foreign clients to do software development. Their focus is on doing business with foreign clients. They will not be a cyber crime organization because they are in a different field. They are different entities. So in this case, if a North Korean company would be involved in cybercrime, or an India company would be involved in cybercrime, as soon as they will be discovered, it will be end of their business. And they cannot afford this kind of stupid activities. So in my view, outsourcing to North Korea is has the same risk as outsourcing to any other outsourcing destination. It is an important topic, but we should not give it a reason not to outsource to North Korea. There are too many advantages.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Then we are going to listen to Mr. Mark Tokola, who has a very impressive CV. He's Vice President of the Korea Economic Institute of America, Washington, DC. So it's one of those think tanks which make the DC so famous. They have specialists in everything. He retired as a US Senior Foreign Service Officer with the rank of Minister Counselor, September 2014. His last posting was Minister Counselor for Political Affairs at the US Embassy in London. Previously, he served as the Deputy Chief of Mission, the American Embassy in Seoul, in Ulaanbaatar, and in Reykjavik. All places where the languages are not so easy. Among his other postings were 2 tours of the US mission to the European Union in Brussels, Minister Counselor for Economic Affairs at the Embassy of London, Economic Counselor at the US Embassy in The Hague. He also served as a director, that's also very interesting, of the Iraq Transition Assistance Office in Baghdad, 2007-8. Mr. Tokola received the State Department's Superior Honor Award for his work of implementing the Dayton Peace Accord by serving as political counselor in Sarajevo in all the crisis of the Bosnia-Herzegovina in 97 to 99. So very, very difficult situation. Holds a BA in International Relations from Pomona College, Claremont, California, and a law degree in European Community Law from the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. Mr. Tokola serves on the Board of Governors of DACOR, an organization of foreign affairs professionals, and on the Board of Trustees of the Bacon House Foundation. So with all that background, I'm sure that you have a very deep knowledge and vision about what happens, since you also posted in Seoul. So we have a little bit the vision of what could be done out of North Korean perspective. You probably will tell us the other side of the coin, and it will be very interesting to put in parallel those 2 points of views. Floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you for inviting me to join you, although I wish we were there in person. I'm actually calling in from the American West Coast. I'm in Bellingham, Washington State right now. I'd like to congratulate the organizers of this event for asking some very important questions. For North Korea, the biggest problem is not denuclearization. The problem is a terrible condition of the North Korean economy. I'm not going to cite many statistics because I've not found them to be reliable in regard to North Korea, but the evidence is strong that they are under economic distress. Observers have said for years that 2 key indicators of the health of the North Korean economy are the price of food and the exchange rate for the North Korean won. Both were remarkably stable for a long time, for years, but over the last few months, both have begun fluctuating, which is a sign to me of economic distress in North Korea. Beyond that, Kim Jong-un has repeatedly told the North Korean people in recent months that they must be prepared for facing difficult challenges ahead, even in regard to having enough food to eat. Part of the problem has been droughts and floods in recent years, and part has been the effect of international sanctions. And now North Korea's self-imposed pandemic border restrictions have cut off imports, even of humanitarian assistance. However, 30 years of economic stagnation have been primarily due to North Korea's mismanagement of its economy. The little improvements they have seen have come from modest market liberalization. North Koreans now rely more on the market than they rely on their state salaries or on rations. However, during the last Workers' Party Congress, the 8th Party Congress last year, and recent speeches from Kim Jong-un have shown the state is beginning to reassert control of the economy, returning to the centrality of the 5-year plans, and putting responsibility for economic performance on cabinet ministers. They're actually stepping away from the market, regrettably. North Korea's economic theory is now based on self-reliance and emphasis on the metal and chemical industries as a backbone of the economy. It's hard to see how any growth or improvement in people's lives will come from that. In the short term, because of concern over the spread of COVID-19, the government's imposed stricter border restrictions than any sanctions regime could possibly impose. So with that, we come to today's topic, the potential for private sector investment to boost North Korean economy. Not only can the private sector play a role in North Korea, I don't think North Korean economy can succeed without it. The issue for us is trying to figure out what we can do that would help North Korea's economy that they might be willing to accept. I'm not even sure they know what to ask for. We may have to help them negotiate for their own interests. The North Korean economy is so weak that we may have to start with some simple barter arrangements. To really get the North Korean economy on its feet will require fundamental reforms in state budgeting, banking systems, property legislation, commercial law, and other areas. Without those reforms, North Korea is going to have difficulty attracting investment either from North Korean entrepreneurs or from foreign investors. They won't have the incentive to risk investment. I'm not sure North Korea will be willing to accept that kind of help from either the United States or from South Korea. It may be that other partners, such as the UN agencies, Eastern European countries, the EU, Mongolia, or Vietnam, may be better placed to work with them on economic reforms. I will add as a footnote that one of North Korea's fundamental problems is how to make best use of their vast mineral resources without being taken advantage of by foreign companies or investors. That's one area in particular in which Mongolia has deep experience and could be of help to North Korea. The international banks will have an important role to play sooner or later. If North Korea is going to attract foreign investment, or if it's going to meaningfully engage in international trade, it will have to establish credit worthiness. That's what the banks can do for them. I would hope at some stage in the peace process, the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund will be able to engage with North Korea, as they did with other formerly socialist countries such as Vietnam. One of the very first steps North Korea will need to take is to show its government revenues and expenditures. The IMF will require that. I expect that will be difficult to achieve for a country as secretive as North Korea, but it will be necessary, and it's certainly North Korea's own interest. In the long term, there will need to be an economic relationship between North and South Korea. They have things to offer each other. South Korea can offer know-how, financial resources, and strong connections to international markets. North Korea, for its part, can offer mineral resources, a skilled labor force, an opportunity for infrastructure construction contracts for North-South Korean firms, and maybe most important, overland access for South Korea to China, Russia, and beyond. One of the challenges will be to ensure that North Korea is not overwhelmed and destabilized by South Korea's economic strength, which is at least 40 times greater than North Korea's. One particular area that will require attention is to make sure that South Korean companies do not absorb North Korean assets. One way to safeguard that would be to have an inter-Korean agreement on competition policy to ensure that South Korean companies do not take too much advantage of their dominant position, and to ensure that South Korean economic activity in North Korea will benefit the North Korean people. Let me stop with that because I hope we can save more time for your questions and answers. But again, thank you for letting me join you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Just a quick question again. You are mentioning the fact that they are ready to restructure the economy. You mentioned that the main skills are minerals and skilled workforce. What I had observed in North Korea was that they still kept a military sector. They still kept a heavy industry sector. Both are heavy and practically very, very hard to change. But they had introduced a light industry sector, which was much less centralized. It was at the level of the provinces and not at the level of the central government. And there they had left a pretty big freedom to the local authorities to develop their local industry. So my question to you, one thing is private sector, another thing is foreign investment. Obviously, the two things are not the same. Right. Is there, in your view, a way, because I don't think it's going to be the traditional American large corporation, that's the second step or the third step. But do you see a way that there could be some cooperation between that light industry sector, which is already relatively decentralized, and some people in the West?
No, you're right. That's been one of the sources of growth, and it has been a development over the past decade or so. Yes, that's possible, but not until there could be some kind of a commercial law enforcement. It's been very difficult for foreign companies to operate in North Korea because they will change the terms of the contracts. We saw what happened to Orascom, the Egyptian company, when he tried to partner on mobile phones in North Korea. They signed a contract, and then North Koreans kicked Orascom out of the country. Or South Korea's efforts with the Kaesong industrial complex to hire North Korean workers, where they signed agreements, but the North Koreans started renegotiating, asking for more money, kind of holding investment as hostage. So there needs to be some reliability and some contract enforcement. The problem now is North Korean regime is so desperate for foreign exchange that it's squeezing the companies that have been successful in trying to operate in the international market and small light industries to produce, give them more foreign exchange. So their ability to grow is shrinking. So I'm with you. I think light industry is the way forward. Less state control is the way forward, but they're moving the opposite direction right now.
Okay, good. And it's very interesting because you offered a transition to the third speaker with the commercial law. Not now, but maybe we should reflect on it a bit later on. I think there are a lot of countries, not necessarily as untransparent as North Korea, but some African countries, many developing countries, where you may have a pseudo law, but because of the corruption, because of a certain type of governments, well, that fluidity does not exist. And basically, you replace the law by the relationship. And maybe in a country like North Korea, if you are close to the decision maker, and if you have a good understanding with the decision maker, it's more important than the law itself. As you know, there are countries, China would be one of them, where when you sign a contract, it doesn't mean you have finished the deal. It means you start negotiating. So that relationship factor, we leave it. So thank you, because you mentioned the law, and our third speaker today is precisely a specialist in that field. So Pablo Sanz is an assistant professor, well, PhD in commercial law at ICAD Law, expert in digital business regulation and corporate law. International experiences in teaching in various European, South American, and Asian universities. Now he also has quite a bit of understanding of the Korean context. He was a speaker, 2017 Legal Scholar Roundtable in Seoul, organized by the Korea Legislation Research Institute. In 2018, at the Trade Law Forum organized by the Regional Center for Asia and the Pacific, UNCITRAL, and the Korean Ministry of Justice, where he talked about technology law and digital market. Recently, he participated as speaker to the 2021 Korea Law Forum, organized by KLRI, where he spoke on research and policy technology law and digital business, Korean and European approach. So it's very interesting because you are going to help us. First speaker spoke very much about the digital economy in North Korea. Second told us that commercial law is absolutely key if we want to develop companies. So tell us how we are going to make it, what can be done, what's difficult to do.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation. It is an honor for me to participate in this forum with this interesting topic. In the 10 minutes that I have, I propose to briefly answer the questions of our roundtable about what would be the factors to promote economic development in North Korea through its private sector and what government policies will be necessary. For this purpose, I am going to analyze what is the current situation of North Korean commercial regulations to attract and channel foreign investments. Second, I will take Vietnam as an element of comparison. Vietnam is a formal socialist republic that has some historical parallels with North Korea. Unlike North Korea, Vietnam has managed to implement economic opening measures that have led to great economic growth in recent decades. The purpose of this comparison is to draw some conclusions. The idea of doing business in North Korea might be relatively new to Western firms, but in fact, there are several existing cases of foreign businesses, mostly Chinese and Russian firms, doing just that. Each firm must have a different plan and goal for doing business in North Korea, but they share one thing. Business are done in the form of a joint venture with the North Korean government, although there are some exceptions. In fact, there were more than 215 joint ventures between China and North Korea, and about 30 joint firms between Russia and the North, up and running as of the end of September 2017. In many communist nations, it is a common tactic to require foreign firms to share control of their local business with the host country as a condition for market access. North Korea is not an exception in this regard. In this sense, North Korean Kim Il-sung University published in 2018 a series of guidelines for foreign companies that are interested in doing business in North Korea. It gives a clearer idea of their requirements. According to the university guidelines, there are 3 options for foreign companies looking to enter North Korea. First, there are 2 types of joint ventures in North Korea. One is a setup where a foreign firm and the North Korean government equally invest and have business control over a joint venture company. The 2 parties also equally share the profits. In another type of joint venture, a foreign company and the North Korean government jointly invest, but the latter has control over the business. Although the North Korean government controls the business, the partner firm can participate in a joint management committee. In this case, profits or losses are shared by both parties, according to Kim Il-sung University. The third business option is called a foreign company. This option allows foreign companies to own 100% of their business entity in North Korea. With this option, the foreign firm has full control of the business, and the North Korean government has no rights to influence the management. Such companies are only allowed to be set up within a special economic zones across the country. Kim Il-sung University stressed that business opportunities are open to anyone, including corporations, individuals, and ethnic Koreans living outside the North, in order to expand exchange and cooperations with other countries. However, there is reason to be skeptical. North Korea does not yet have a proper environment for foreign companies to invest in. For instance, North Korea lacks laws, systems, and rules for dispute settlement, insurance, wages, and remittances. In addition, infrastructure from roads, railroads, and telecommunications to the supply of electricity, gas, and water is extremely poor. And there are not commercial banks or insurance companies because all financial and insurance systems are controlled by the state. Industrial capital stock is nearly beyond repair as a result of decades of mismanagement, underinvestments, shortage, and spare parts, and poor maintenance. Resource misallocation, large-scale military spending, and nuclear programs severely draw off resources needed for investments and civilian consumption. In addition, industrial and power outputs have stagnated for years at a fraction of pre-1990s levels. So why doesn't North Korea become more like Vietnam? Vietnam and North Korea were once considered two of a kind, divided countries sharing a border with China and determined to unify their countries under the chosen ideology of communism. After the Cold War, the two took very different paths. In many ways, modern North Korea is equivalent to Vietnam in the 80s. For one, the Communist Party of Vietnam has ruled the state ever since its independence in 1945, just as the Workers' Party of Korea has always governed North Korea. In the late 1980s, Vietnam embraced free market reforms that eventually opened the country up. Vietnam tried the dogma of the centrally planned economy for a long time and was almost reaching the point of collapse. Then some managers of a state-owned enterprise in South Vietnam flooded the communist regulations by paying the workers according to their production instead of a fixed salary. The Saigon communist leaders visited the factory and had sufficient intelligence or pragmatism to see that was a good thing rather than disobedience that needed to be punished. They started to allow other state-owned enterprises to do the same. The Hanoi communist leaders went south to investigate why the southern enterprises did so well compared to the northern ones. They collectively came to appreciate some benefits of capitalism, but only after an intense internal ideological struggle. Now, Vietnam frontier market is one of the world's fastest growing economies, thanks to an expanding middle class, a strong manufacturing sector, and young population. Vietnam began receiving assistance from the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank in the 1990s, after it began enacting reforms. That was followed by significant foreign investments and membership to the World Trade Organization in 2007. Vietnam has also maintained geopolitical flexibility and relationship building. For example, Hanoi enjoys close ties with Washington despite stark ideological differences and decades of hostility during the Vietnam War. Hanoi has also managed to cultivate ties with many countries, including Russia, Japan, and India. As a result of this improvement in access and trade relations, Vietnam has been one of the fastest growing countries of the past 20 years. On the other side, North Korea remains closed for business, so they remain among the world's poorest. Hanoi government is working hard to develop economic prosperity. Vietnamese politicians know that Vietnam cannot achieve real growth for the country if they don't reintegrate Vietnam into the global economy. Conversely, North Korea is a prime example of how less prosperous a country can be by remaining unwilling to fully embrace all the things the world has to offer to improve the people in just about every facet of life. Now, the GDP of Vietnam increased by an amazing 7% last year. Vietnamese GDP is the 47th in the world. North Korean is the 113th. In fact, it is estimated that Vietnam might become one of the biggest economies, possibly 25 biggest economies by GDP by 2050. North Korea is in a stark contrast, remains so tightly controlled that private markets have to flourish illegally or semi-legally for the sake of survival, while legitimate large-scale private enterprises is largely unknown. To conclude, Vietnam may not be a free country politically, but the Vietnamese enjoy a degree of real economic freedom that North Korean can only dream. when Vietnam government decide to open the market and introduce capitalism to improve economy, most Vietnamese people happily follow the government policy. If North Korea tries the same, most Koreans will find how much they have been cheated by their government and want to be united by South Korea, like happened in Germany. Any North Korean attempt at liberalization will depend on the progress of ongoing nuclear negotiations. The lifting of sanctions, coupled by economic reforms and changes in national security policy and international relations, could help put the North Korean economy on a path of a stable growth and economic integration. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Pablo. I like very much your comparison of North Korea and Vietnam, and I personally agree totally with everything you said about Vietnam.
Thank you so
Now,
much.
that being said, I think there is a clear distinction to be made between ideological consideration and business consideration. We all know that some of the best business managers in China come from the school of the Communist Party. So Chinese is typically an example which is pretty much business driven, although it's highly communist. I think when you make a comparison between North Korea, China, and Vietnam, you see that in the three countries, the Communist Party rules and want to continue ruling and wants to keep the power. So that's the not negotiable factor. The Communist Party must keep the power. That's the ideology. But the difference between the three, or one of the major differences between the three, coming back to the question of digitalization and communication, in North Korea, you hardly have internet. And of course, no social network. In China, you have internet at every corner, but things like Google would be replaced by Chinese version of the net. And in Vietnam, you have the internet everywhere and a full access to the social network. And I understand that an average Vietnamese below 30 is spending up to 4 hours per day on the social network. And I also understand that the Communist Party is a little bit using the Facebook and those kind of things as a parallel parliament, because they are listening, they are looking at the audience, they are digitally not only controlling, but also checking how the mood is evolving, and they are somehow adapting the decision based on what they hear on the net. So I would like to have your views on that point, because you made a very interesting comparison. So how do you see that digital liberalization from close to zero in North Korea to close to 100% in Vietnam, with in the three cases a very strong Communist Party as central committee of the party? How do you see that as a differentiating factor? And how do you see that it could be part of the evolution and the solution?
Thank you very much, Dr. Béglé. Well, I think that since the late 80s, the Vietnamese politicians were pragmatic compared to the North Korean politicians. They focus on economic growth more than in ideological or political issues. So the Vietnamese communism is not a real doctrinary communism. I mean, Ho Chi Minh was more a nationalist man. He was more a nationalist leader against China. So when the Soviet Union fell down, the Communist Party of Vietnam tried to open its economy, because they lost its main ally, which was Moscow. So this is the main contrast with North Korea, in my opinion. So on the other side, I think that before ideological, putting aside or putting aside the ideological things, I think that as Mr. Tilla said before, personal interaction is the key to do business. I mean, trust is the foundation of economics. So for this reason, North Korea should be more trustful. I mean, they need more transparency, they need more openness in order to attract foreign investments. So they have to create new kind of trust, because if not, Vietnamese were able to create a trustful atmosphere. So this is the key question. And Vietnam was able to do that in the late 80s. Now it takes long, at least 10, 20 years to create a good boost of private sector. And North Korea has to do the same if they want to make a developed economy.
Thank you. Now we would like to leave the three of you interacting and asking each other questions and debating, asking, answering, sharing opinions. So the floor is to all of you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me make an observation about Vietnam and see if Dr. Sanz agrees. I spoke to a Vietnamese official and I asked the question, how did you succeed? And he said, we succeeded because we have South Vietnamese who know how to do international business and engage in the international world. So they were relying on their South Vietnamese friends to help them once Vietnam was united. North Korea does not have South Koreans in North Korea. When they were part of the socialist bloc world, they had experience with other countries, educated in Eastern European universities, some exposure to the world. They've not had that for 30 years. And I'm not sure if the North Koreans have the ability to know what to do to reform their economy like they used to have. So, Dr. Sanz, do you think part of Vietnam's success story was that South Vietnamese were able to join the government and point the way?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that the Vietnamese phenomenon is a kind of example. It's an example for North Korea. It's a kind of paradigm of how a communist country can transform itself by conserving its own communist regime in terms of political system. So I think that North Korea has a good example of what to do. But as I told you before, I think that it requires a lot of time because trust is not automatic. I mean, trust to build trust in the business world takes very long. So if they start now, if North Korea start now creating good atmosphere for business, for example, participating in doing business of World Bank ranking, providing information for investors, international investors, to open its economy, to transform the joint venture regime, taxation, and reducing its corruption, or for example, the contract enforcement, the translations of regulations, many other things. There are many things to do in North Korea if they want to transform its economy in the long term to get united to the South. That is the goal, the purpose of everything, in my opinion.
Just a point on my side, how did you see that question of the trust? You remember, for example, the former communist bloc, when it came to credit rating, they were very high. You knew that you would always be paid. So that's one element of trust. On the other side, the question was asked in the second presentation, well, are they going to disclose their source of revenue? And the answer is, of course not, because currently, due to the sanction, part of the revenues are clearly illegal revenues. Part of, the petrol, which is, there are so many cars in North Korea, and there is, in principle, no petrol. So it's all coming from China. And we, without being nasty, but we know that there is weapon trade, there is a little bit of cyber attacks, as we said. There are, I think the North Koreans have become, because they are very good technicians, I think they are the best producers of false dollars, to be circulated in the world. So they cannot say, oh yes, we do that. So on one side, some elements, the feeling I had is with the North Koreans I met, I really have a feeling that I can trust them. You know, if they want, I did not do an investment in North Korea, but if I did an investment, I'm pretty sure they would stick to their word more than some other countries which are not communist countries. You know, some of those banana republics where you never know. I mean, India now, you have rule of law, but the law is interpreted in different ways depending on the various interests. So I think if North Korea, which would be government, tells me we have a deal, I think I can trust them. On the other side, if the question was, how do they finance their budget? Well, it's guaranteed we would never have an answer. So how do you see that trust factor? How do you see the component of the trust factor?
For who is this question?
Yeah, who should answer you?
Whoever wants.
Okay.
Whoever dares, or whoever has an idea.
We are talking about two different situations. I mean, we are talking from a private business point of view. I think in many situations, private businesses can do business with other countries, companies in other countries, even though the law situation is very different. But I think one of the main issues is the Cold War situation. And that's, I think, I would like to ask Pablo Sanz. In Vietnam, there is no Cold War situation anymore between Vietnam and the United States. The United States, they have accepted their defeat. They lost the Vietnam War, and they are willing to work with Vietnam on a normal basis. However, that's not the case with North Korea. There is still an extreme cold and sometimes hot war situation between the United States and North Korea. And the United States is not willing to change this fundamentally. Their focus on nuclear disarmament is a little bit misleading because they are not willing to engage with North Korea on a non-Cold War situation. And in such a case, we cannot compare North Korea with Vietnam, I think. These are totally different situations.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree, Mr. Tilla. I think that there are some similarities, but of course, there are many differences in terms of international relations, diplomatic issues, border controversial. So, of course, there are many differences between Vietnam and North and South Korea. But I think that in terms of economic development, I think that Vietnam demonstrates to the world that it's capable to maintain communist party regime. It is formally a socialist republic. It has only just a unique party system, but in terms of economic system, I think that is a good example for North Korea. I think it's a good example to boost the private sector initiatives starting by open the economy to the population and society of North Korea. In this sense, I think that there are some similarities, and Vietnam can be a very good example for North Korea.
I think so. And I also noticed that there were some North Korean delegations already visiting Vietnam. But still, if I talk from a European perspective, if I want to pay my North Korean partners, I cannot use the banking system. A very simple thing, if you want to do business, you want to pay your bills. It is not possible to pay the North Koreans, or the North Koreans cannot pay me, because the Americans do not allow foreigners or Europeans to use the international banking system. So this whole Cold War situation, especially because of the United States, is hampering all normal business. So even if North Korea is opening up, it is still giving a lot of problems.
Yeah, if I may, I know we're here to talk more about commercial and economic activity than politics, but it has been raised. So let me just say the Biden administration, through its special representative Sung Kim, has offered to meet with North Koreans unconditionally, anywhere, anytime, to be open negotiations. They've refused to do that. I don't think it's because North Koreans are anti-diplomacy at this point. I think it's because they're so concerned with their internal crisis with the COVID restrictions that they don't have the bandwidth to engage in diplomacy right now. But I think that the US government is waiting for North Korea to respond to its invitation to talk. And I think that the US does want a peaceful settlement. I don't think the US wants to have a state of armistice continue forever. For North Korea's part, they seem to rely on outside pressure as an excuse for their internal repression and economic control. I think it'll be difficult for North Korean regime to find a way to open up until it can have a reason for being other than the foreign threat, which is what they're always telling the North Korean people they're facing. And on investment, I think that there are North Korean entrepreneurs who want foreign partners, but I'm not sure the North Korean government understands that. A European diplomat I know met with the Minister for Trade, or whatever the equivalent is, and asked a question to him: what are you doing to attract foreign investment? And the North Korean minister said, we published a book, foreigners can read it and comply. So in other words, not much. I'm not sure the government cares that much about it.
Well, actually, I will, on our last visit, we visited the coastal city of Wonsan in the eastern part, and North Korea has been building a huge tourism facility on the coast. It has a large number of hotels and other facilities. So they invested a lot of money in this new tourist venue. It is possible for South Koreans, as they did in the past, to visit North Korean tourism facilities. South Korea is not helpful in any way to facilitate this. They are afraid of violating international sanctions. And this is an example, I think, for the North Koreans, how difficult it is to attract foreigners, foreign tourists, even though the facilities are almost ready and there.
I would like to just come on this point. I visited the same center. It's quite impressive. It's about 6 kilometers long, with 1 4 5-star hotel after the other in construction, and a huge international airport. So, of course, there would be a contradiction between saying the country is completely closed and they build a big international airport for that. It could be like in Cuba, where you have places, or in the past, where you had really tourists arriving at a certain spot, not entering in the rest of the islands, etc. But I personally have also the feeling that they are willing to open up. The problem, what I wanted to say just before, as long as we have a global problem, as long as we have the sanctions, not only the US, by the way, as long as we consider they are outcast, it will be difficult to find a really good solution. So it's step and step. They have to make a few steps forward, and the West has also to help. And probably it's by the investment in the private sector, small things, but small things which will little by little grow and show to the others that it's possible, that it will be. So I don't expect an instant global solution. I personally would think it's the strategy of one path after the other, slowly, 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 but making it possible. And I think there is a good chance that they would accept those small investments, small measures, small companies, not starting with the very big investments. I don't know, what are your views?
Well, that's what we see in the field of IT outsourcing. You always start very small. And it's not even related to North Korea. Even if you want to outsource work to India, you are starting to work with a new partner, a new country, a new culture. It is not easy. So you will always start with a small project. So even if it fails, then the risks are relatively low. And I think this is also the case for North Korea. You have to start with low risk and smaller projects. And if it is successful, you can make it larger and more complex. But I think for North Korea, the best way is to start small with less risky projects, yes.
If I can say briefly, I think we could go back one step earlier and say that the biggest source of capital for North Korea is within North Korea. They need to mobilize North Korean capital. Because so far, the North Koreans are unwilling to put the money to banks because they're afraid of being confiscated. So they hide their money. They're unwilling to invest it. So if the government could create some certainty or some property rights for North Koreans to mobilize their own capital, that'd be a huge start, well before foreign investment.
Could we maybe take some questions from the audience? And I'd like here to request the organizers if they want to put forward one or two questions which have been asked by the auditors. If one of the organizers could help with some of the questions. Yes. Enrique.
Thank you very much, Dr. Béglé. It is being very interesting webinar. Thank you to everybody. Really very interesting. And going to the central point of our webinar, I would like to ask, what, in your opinion, would be the first step to be taken in North Korea in order to introduce the private initiative and the private property? The question is for everybody. Maybe for Tigia, that knows better North Korea.
Well, I think the first step is we must make more, it must be made more clear to the European private sector what actual business opportunities there are in North Korea. And I must say, this is also a responsibility of the North Korean government, by the way, or the North Korean companies. They are not active that much as in Vietnam or China, for example, in promoting their business opportunities to the outside world. But nevertheless, there is already sufficient information available. And I think it is also up to the private companies who are willing to explore North Korea, including some of the attendees maybe of this webinar, to come together and to think what can be done and what could be done by people within this network as a first step. Just, let's say, a roundtable meeting or another webinar about actual business opportunities. And then the second one is to go together to North Korea, if that's possible. Otherwise, we do it virtually, and to see if already some small real-life projects are possible. I think this is maybe the best way to start in our community.
I will give my answer. When I went to North Korea, the mission which I had was to precisely think how they could open up to the Western world and how the private sector could enter. First of all, they are looking at models like Vietnam, as you said, or Mongolia, which were countries which used to be, I would not even say communist, Stalinistic, like them, and who open up to a kind of market economy, plus kind of, for Mongolia, more or less democratic system. Not exactly the one you would have in the Northern Europe, for example, but still kind of. And they are seriously looking at those. I had a feeling after all the conversations I had with, I've visited a lot of companies and I met also with the government. I have a feeling that, of course, it has to be non-strategic, non-military, non-heavy industry to start with. I got a feeling that there was a very high level of interest for anything which is about tourism. I had a feeling that there was a very, and for example, that station which they have in the East is just unbelievable. When you see that, it's unbelievable what they have done. There was a very high interest in the field of agriculture and food processing. And there, I'm nearly convinced they would be ready to support a company which would come. They would be as well support for basic healthcare. And there would be an interest if we bring industry, but not the heavy industry, relatively light industry, but helping them to go one step further in value added from what they have. I just opened a parenthesis. I visited the shoe factory, but it's really done still by hand and in plastic. And but in the shoe factory, they had more than 40 different design, because they wanted that the people don't have, like in the traditional communist country, one type. They wanted that the people have a choice. So that's very interesting. They are opening up, and they were talking with some design companies in Milano to open. So I think those, plus the IT sector, I fully agree. Those are the sectors where we talk of relatively small investment, where we talk of an entrance barrier, which is not too big, and where it doesn't interfere with the hegemony of the party, with the military or the political dominance. But I'm pretty sure that if you do that, you have or you don't have the law, the commercial law, but they are so eager to demonstrate that it's possible that they would make it possible. They will try, with or without the law, to make you succeed, because they want to have a few people who could say, I went there, I did it, and yes, it worked. So they will replace the law which we have by your willingness to demonstrate. That's my belief. I may be wrong, but that's the perception I have.
Yes, I have some three practical ideas for answer the question of Mr. Enrique. I think that the first point, or the main reason, is political leaders in North Korea should be more pragmatic. I mean, I think that they should, to avoid or forget the political and historical backgrounds and controversies. I mean, we are now in the context of the fourth industrial revolution. IT markets, IP markets, robotics, computers. So in the future, and now in the present, the economy will require even more and more cooperation and integration. In the international level. So North Korea shouldn't be as close as it's now. I think that the political leaders in North Korea should be more pragmatic. The second reason is that they need to stop wasting huge amount of public budget in weapons, in missiles, in nukes, in military forces. It's a waste of money. This kind of resources, financial resources, should be devoted to more interesting things like education, agricultural, computer, and this kind of IP markets, IT markets. And the third reason for me is also very important: more transparency. More, they have to provide information to the World Bank. For example, as I said before, the World Bank has a very interesting ranking called the Doing Business ranking. North Korea doesn't appear in this ranking. 190 countries take part in this ranking, not North Korea. I think the first step is to start improving the metrics in this ranking by providing information to the international institutions, investors, etc. This kind of thing will create trust for the foreign investors. So this is the three reasons in order to answer the questions of Mr. Enrique.
Yeah, I guess what I would add is that, it's important to realize that some things do go on. There is some quiet work being done in North Korea today. So it's not as if no one's communicating with them and are refusing to talk to them. I'm thinking of the United Nations Economic and Social Committee for Asia Pacific, ESCAP. North Korea is a member of the ESCAP group of Northeast Asian countries. And North Korean government has asked ESCAP for help with commercial law and some banking regulations, railway switching. And North Korea provides data to ESCAP on bird migrations or air pollution. So there's quiet work that's going on, and it's probably good that it's quiet. You know, if North Korea can engage in some behind the scenes discussions with some international organizations, that could be trust building too. And we might encourage UN agencies to do more if they could.
What I see from a Dutch perspective, there is some trade going on. Also, it has been quite successful. For example, in the field of potatoes, the Netherlands and also Dutch universities, they are quite advanced in producing new seeds, new varieties of potatoes. They have been introduced in North Korea, including research on potato diseases. And I'm sure the North Koreans would like to repeat this again, but the problem is there is not sufficient foreign currency available in the north. Some time ago, we had a North Korean delegation visiting the Netherlands to look at sustainable energy, including wind energy, in which Netherlands is also quite advanced. But it's quite expensive to export those machinery to the north. So for this reason, I think it is more useful to think about how we can bring money into North Korea. And that means we cannot focus on selling things, but we have to think about what can we buy from the north. Tourism is an example, outsourcing is an example. So there are options. What I would also like to mention is academic exchange. This is something which is, I think, not very difficult to achieve. Sending foreign academic delegations to the north or inviting North Korean academic delegations to Europe. This can be done relatively easy and which can be appreciated by both sides.
On the foreign exchange, again, there is a big difference to be made between the macroeconomy and the real life in each shop. In the macroeconomy, I fully agree, there is, of course, a lack of foreign exchange. When you walk in North Korea, because I had insisted when I went there to have the possibility to work alone from time to time and choose where I was going. And when I was asking the people to open the cash box, you have RMB everywhere. And actually the RMB is both a foreign currency and a domestic currency. And it shows you the overlap between the Chinese economy, which is completely dominant in North Korea, and the own North Korean economy. So if you go through big projects, we have to talk official foreign currency. If we talk to what I said before, small things in agriculture, in the food processing, you have all those things where they are ways and means how the money circulates. If I may, I realize that the watch is going on and we are all very happy in that conversation, at least I am, and I'm very grateful to all of you. When it's crisp and short, it's better than when it's too lengthy. We don't want to have Fidel Castro type of speeches. So could you please, each of you, try to give out of that conversation, I will shut up, not to disturb, I spoke much. Could you please give as a conclusion your views on our conversation? And I let you choose the order who wants to speak first.
Well, I would say the most important issue is there's a lot of interest. I noticed we have a lot of attendees, so there's a lot of interest in these topics. but it's all about what can private businesses do. I mean, we cannot change the world. We cannot change the Cold War situation that much. The only thing we can do as individuals or members of organizations is to connect with the North Koreans, to exchange our ideas, to see what kind of engagement is possible, what kind of business is possible. And I think we should focus on those small steps in the future.
Thank you very much.
Well, I think that for me, the conclusion is very clear. I think that doing business with North Korea requires trust. Trust means transparency at the institutional framework. I think that North Korea leaders have to be more pragmatic. They have to stop spending a lot of amount of money in military instead of education, for example. And I think that both sides, of course, has to make their best to get this approach, this integration from the Western economies and North Korean regime. And one point could be education, to improve, to start with education exchanges, students, professors. So I think that we can, I put an example about Vietnam. I think that North Korea has an example of the Vietnamese economy. The Vietnamese economy is one of the best examples of the Asian economy. So I think that that was my approach to this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I guess I'd make 2 points concluding. One is that the good news is North Korean economy is so small that any assistance can make a big difference.
Yes.
South Korea is one of the world's 10 biggest economies. North Korean GDP is probably $60 billion, best estimate I've seen. North Korea is the same size economy as the city of Des Moines, Iowa. It is a small, poor country, so little things can make a difference. Second point is I would like to keep the North Korean people kind of uppermost in mind. I think we need to see what we can do to help the North Korean population. And I think that does mean economic reform. I think we need to try to nudge North Korea in the direction of helping the North Korean entrepreneurs, the markets, trying to help them rather than trying to find ways to enrich the regime. So if we can draw that distinction, it'd be a helpful one.
I think that is a very, very good conclusion. I would be surprised that there could be a discussion on reduce the military expenses and invest in the economy. I think those are two completely separate streams. One will be the defense and the image of North Korea, etc. And another one for the government is to open up the economy and to try to attract those businesses. I personally believe that if we start by little businesses in sectors where the, again, entrance barrier is low and where the local people can be involved and where we are not only thinking of, Washington, Capitol Hill and Pyongyang, and we are the president of the United States and the president of North Korea, but we're just talking of those people who are on the field, and many of them are suffering, but some of them have a level of aspiration to a little bit more. And because they are hard worker, because Koreans, North and South, are hard worker, and because there is already a big effort which is done on the education, let's find little steps which give to some of those people the chance to live a little bit better. And then you will have hundreds, and then you will have thousands, and then you will have maybe not the 25 million, but you will have 5 or 8 million, which will live better. And then the change will become unavoidable. So thank you to everybody. Muchas gracias, Enrique, who has been the organizer of that. I think it has been for all of us a good opportunity to exchange our views. And I really thank you for your contribution. I learned a lot. So namaste since I'm in India.
Namaste. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
So thank you very much. Thank you.
Excellent session with excellent speakers.